Hello. Today, we're going to talk about the basics of circles. So, you all know what a circle is. We'll talk about a bit about the equation and then understanding that equation, what it tells us. So our goals then are be able to find the equation of a circle if given the center and radius, or if we have enough information to find the center and radius in some other way, then be able to find the center and radius of a circle given the equation of the circle. First off, let's talk about what the equation of the circle looks like. It looks like this. So, the equation of a circle with a center, we're going to call h and k, where h is the x-coordinate of the center and k is the y-coordinate. And has some radius small r. Of course, the radius r has to be positive, otherwise it's not a circle, is given by this equation. Okay, so let's come over here and draw just a basic idea of what we're talking about. So let's just say we have, for simplicity, let's just say we're in the first quadrant, and here's my circle. Here's the center. So it says x-coordinate h, y-coordinate k, and then the radius is r. And so the equation of that is x minus h squared, just rewriting this, plus y minus k squared, is equal to r squared. And that's the general equation for a circle. Now, if you're in a situation where your circle is at the origin, then it just reduces this equation because essentially then h and k are both 0. So let's take a look at that really quickly. Let's say you're at the origin. Here's our center, 0, 0. And let's just say we have a circle like this. This is our radius r. Okay. And so once again, the equation of this, centered at the circle, is x squared plus y squared. Well, let me back up a bit, and more generally, this is going to be from the equation here. Of course, this is going to be x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to r squared, which of course, that's just going to reduce to x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. Now, this equation is also related to the Pythagorean theorem. As we think about a point on our circle, once again from the origin, if this point here is x and y, we think about the x, this distance here, of course, is x, this is y, and this is the right triangle, then this equation is related to the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, basically take the square root of both sides of this, then r, I'm not allowed to say space, but that's okay, r then of course is equal to square root of x squared plus y squared. So that's actually where the Pythagorean theorem is related, because basically any point, if you think about the collections of all points that are a distance, some distance r from the center of the origin of center of any circle from the origin, that creates a circle of that radius. Okay. Now, let's take a look at a few examples practicing with this. So first, let's find, first couple, we're going to find the equation of the circle. Okay. Number one, say with center, -3, 5, and radius r is equal to 5. And we'll actually graph these as well. Okay, so the center, so basically, just kind of match everything up. Now, one thing we're going to see is that when we create our equation, we're going to have x plus or minus something squared, then y plus or minus something squared is equal to the radius squared. That's the easiest thing. So this is going to be 5 squared. Okay, now this minus here is part of it. If you notice, then our x coordinate of our center is also negative. So like if you've seen the distance formula, it works very similarly. the Pythagorean theorem and the distance formula. And this we have y minus 5. And so this is going to become x plus 3 squared, then plus y minus 5 squared is equal to 5 squared. Well, and 5 squared, of course, is 25. Okay, now let's actually take a look at Desmos to help us graph this. And one thing you want to notice, and a quick way to think about this, is basically between the center and your equation, your signs switch. So in the center, if this is negative, it becomes positive in the equation. If this is positive given the center, then it becomes negative here in the same way. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's easier. You're kind of going through the steps here, but it's an easier way to think of it. If you can remember that, is your signs switch between the center and the radius. Now let's go to Desmos and actually graph this. We can graph circles with Desmos. It's desmosdsmos.com. And so just type in the equation as we saw it. So first off, use parentheses, click the first one. Then we have x plus 3, and close the parentheses. Now then do an exponent, just do the rooftop squared, and then a right arrow to get out of the exponent. And then do the same thing here for y, plus y minus 5 squared, and is equal to 25, and that gives us our circle. Okay, now it doesn't actually show us our center. If we can find that, we can label that. So I can just do the point -3, 5 and label it. Oops. And that is actually our center. Then our radius, then, of course, we go down here. The radius is 5, as we said. So actually, use to see if we count down here, you have 5 spaces between here, and it actually touches the x-axis. So that's our circle. Now, let's go back and take a look at another example. This time, the same thing. So we have the center is going to be 0, 11, and the radius is going to be 4/3. Of course, these numbers can be any sorts of numbers. They can be fractions, have radicals, anything like that. Okay, same thing. So we're going to have x, then minus our x coordinate 0 squared, plus y minus our y coordinate, which is 11 squared. And then we have to take or square our radius, which is 4/3. Okay, now, of course, x minus 0, just x is 0, so the easiest to write is x. It's not incorrect to write it this way, but it's better to write it this way, plus y minus 11 squared is equal to, if you remember to square a fraction, you square the numerator and denominator separately. That's going to be 4 squared, which is 16, over 3 squared, which is 9. Okay, let's go back to Desmos and graph that as well. So I'm just going to turn both of these off. And actually, also you have to make sure you don't label that. Then it was x squared plus y minus 11 squared is equal to, then you do a fraction to Desmos, just do the numerator, then the fraction sign where the question mark is, then 9. Okay, so that, and we can move this around, that's our center. That's our circle. So let's zoom in a bit and see this. We said our center should be at 0, 11. It is. We have to graph, you can see. And then that's our circle. So that's how you can go from, if you know, given the center and the radius, or at least give enough information to find the center and the radius, you can find the equation of that circle. Okay. Now let's take a look at a couple examples going back the other way. So we actually are given the equation, then we want to find the center and radius. We'll find the center and radius. Okay, so number 1. Let's say this is our equation. X plus 2 squared plus y minus 7 squared is equal to 20. Okay, Now, we know this is the equation of our circle, okay? And once again, we know a few things about this. So let's go ahead and find our center. That's actually the easiest thing to find in this case. So we know here we're given the coordinates of both. So here, this is a 2, but remember our signs change. So this is a negative, this is a positive. That means this becomes -2, sign switch, and this becomes in +7. So this circle is centered at -2, 7. Now the radius is then going to be the square root of this. This is squared, so it's going to be the square root of 20. And if you've seen this before, then you also just going to have to practice, make sure you can simplify radicals. So we're going to do for a square root, we want to know if there are any perfect squares in 20, we can simplify those. You know that 20 is the same as 4 times 5. So we can actually break this up since we're multiplying. The square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And so this is going to be, of course, the square root of 4 is 2, same as 2 times the square root of 5. Now, let's also approximate that, since in most realistic situations you're going to have to use this, you want to use this as some kind of a decimal. You just plug that into your calculator, whatever kind of calculator you're using. So the square root of 5, and then times 2. And so this is approximately, I'll do 2 decimal places, approximately 4.47. Okay, so once again, let's also graph that. So let's go back to Desmos. In this case, I think let's see, I'll just blank that. Okay, so our equation was x plus 2 squared plus y minus 7 squared equals 20. Now, it is actually a fairly large circle, which kind of makes sense since we have a fairly big, reasonably big radius. Okay, now we said the center should be -2, +7. And that appears to be right. Label it. All right. That appears to be the center of our circle. Of course, we can also zoom in a bit if we want. And so that's our circle. All right, let's do one more. Okay, this time, let's say we have x minus 10 squared plus y squared is equal to 4. Okay, the same way, so let's find the center. Now, if you notice this time, there's no y plus or minus anything. So this is the same or is equal to, if this helps, we need to do this, x minus 10 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to 4. If that helps, they don't have to do that step. Okay. So our center is, once again, remember we switch the signs. This is -10 becomes +10. And this, of course, 0 is neither positive or negative, just 0. Then our radius is the square root of this. So the square root of 4, and that's easy, that's 2. So once again, let's graph this on Desmos and make sure that's right. Let me blank out both of those. And then this is x minus 10 quantity squared plus y squared is equal to 4. Oops. All right, I forgot to put that as 10. There we are. And we said our center should be 10, 0. We can tell that's what it is. We don't have to do that. And also radius is 4. And so our radius is 2, rather. We see that as well from our graph. Good. So that's correct. So what we learned today is the very basics of circles. So what the equation is, and also how, if you're given the center and the radius or some ways to find them, you can find the equation of the circle, or if you know the equation of the circle, you can find the center or radius. Thank you. Have a good day.